Today's guest, Jakob Gillmann, founder of HiPeople.
Both the acquisition or the search side of things, as well as kind of everything that happens post-hire, there's a lot of great technology there. Peakon, automated is tracking and analysis of engagement data. There's great technology there. But what's really underestimated is the impact and the potential of like really, really good selection. And that was kind of the bird's eye view on the whole topic we're working on with HiPeople. The personal entry point was we were mega frustrated ourselves as hiring manager that we kind of entered a room like the one we're sitting in right now. And we look at a CV 15 minutes before the call. We maybe got a glance at the LinkedIn profile and then kind of ran through standard questions that were kind of fit to this being a culture fit interview or this being a skill fit interview. And then we're asked, hey, please score and rate, and would you hire or not hire?
Jakob and I met through several events here in Berlin, what he organized, and now we organized a podcast with him. And we talked mainly about his journey, what shaped him most as an entrepreneur, from starting to sell shoes up to his time at Peakon, who then got acquired from Workday. And there he got a bit into the HR tech field. His time at Optimizely, how Salesforce executives and managers shaped his mind and his career. And also about the quality of hire and how expensive it is to make hiring mistakes and what you can do about it. So a very insightful and exciting episode. Tune in.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very, 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 very hard to change things.
That was the learning.
Entrepreneurs with empathy.
To the people side.
Hi, Jakob. Tell us more about your journey.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Happy to talk to you about kind of the last couple of years and what I currently do.
Yes, and it's also funny how we met because I think it was directly in a webinar you organized, and then at an event you organized, and now we do a podcast I organized.
Very good. Yeah, full circle.
Yes. So, maybe I think what would be super interesting for us to understand first is who are you and what shaped you most in your journey?
Wow, big question to kick it off with. My name is Jakob, one of the co-founders here at HiPeople. HiPeople is a software solution for modern recruiting and TA teams. We'll get into the details of that probably later in this session as well. So I'm very curious to talk about that. What has shaped me the most? I think coming from family and a city, Cologne, Köln, that is very much kind of entrenched in creativity and people taking maybe different routes than what would have been expected. So Cologne is very liberal. My family is kind of embedded in the whole like media landscape. Oh, nice. I think that has shaped me quite a lot. To not kind of always go for the kind of expected path that is set up for you. Be it this classic like dependency from like education leads to job A leads to job B. I always found people interesting that take their own path, and I always try to kind of like make these like very conscious decisions around my career as well. And I think what we're doing every day with building a company, building a team, building a product. So this entrepreneurial journey, it's the most creative thing that one can do probably in the business context. If you ask me what has shaped me the most, I think that coming and that kind of like family context.
And what was the start of your career? I think when I looked at your profile, you were in venture development and also doing some internships at VCs.
Yeah, but I think the first proper career step was selling shoes.
Nice. Which shoes?
3 days a week, Vans mostly, in a shop called Double 8 in Cologne. So twice a week after school and then every Saturday. And kind of like grinding in my early years there. And we slightly talked about kind of these like connection points in my career with go-to-market related activities and in sales and software. And I think that was the first steps towards like the sales side of myself. Like, what does it take to, give somebody the product that they want, but also maybe help them make the decision.
Nice. And this was in Cologne?
Yep. Yeah.
And the shoe store still exists?
Unfortunately, not anymore.
No, because you left.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Okay, and what made you decide then? You studied economics?
I studied business with a big focus and major in actually communications and culture. So very broad bachelor, and then in master's in Copenhagen Business School with a bigger focus on that track is called like innovation and entrepreneurship. So kind of classic business school masters with a side track on the entrepreneurial thing. What I learned there is you can't study being an entrepreneur. You can't study anything that has to do with entrepreneurship other than maybe the kind of like research that happens around entrepreneurship. But I think nothing could be more removed from being an entrepreneur than doing research on it. But it was definitely an interesting time there. But yeah, first professional step, selling shoes, and then interned basically whenever I had the chance to intern during school, during my studies. I think I did 3 internships in venture capital during my bachelor's, and then kind of grew out of that experience into being an operator in the field. And that was also kind of a very conscious decision. The venture track felt super exciting, and I could have seen myself go down that route as well. But I felt like the individuals in VC that I've met throughout these internships, one was with Capnamic in Cologne, one with Christoph Mehr and Atlantic Labs here in Berlin, and then one with Passion Capital in London. And the most interesting people I've met there were former operators turned VC, and not, I mean, they are also great, but I felt closer to those folks compared to the ones maybe coming from kind of the financial industry and then kind of switching over into
investment
VC.
Background and so on.
IB exactly, or other trades. There's a lot of folks from M&A, etc., going into this world as well. And you need them, but I always found that the partners, the investment managers that did something entrepreneurship related before, these are the ones that really have seen it. So I consciously decided against spending more time there and to really jump into the field and get as much exposure to, the creative side of entrepreneurship. We talked about that, but also the responsibility that comes with this and the kind of building process of, again, building a product, building a team, a service, a company.
Yeah. So you felt then the entrepreneurial spirit there?
Yeah. I thought you wanted to say trap.
Trap.
You fell into the entrepreneurial trap. No, definitely. And I think more or less every experience in those like early 5, 6, 7 years have kind of like increased the interest and hunger in throwing myself out there and doing something on my own. Very funny, Sebastian, my co-founder, went through a very comparable experience. He took a different route working with big tech, but we kind of then, after a couple of years, met with same perspective on the pain point we want to solve with the product and the same hunger for building something. And for me, my journey went through, I think very much, you asked what shaped me the most. I think what was a big impact in this early years was being part of a kind of a mid-sized SaaS company for me that was Optimizely. They were freshly funded, I think, Series B. Andreessen Horowitz went on board and they expanded globally.
What's the product?
A/B testing and personalization on the web. So
at what time? What year was it?
2015. Excuse me, end of 2014 and then into 2015.
This was the time where A/B testing and sales marketing automation really got huge.
Yeah.
Like generative AI now, somehow.
Yeah, probably that is going to last longer and have a bigger impact. But in terms of hype, very comparable. Everybody was talking data-driven this, data-driven that, and the whole idea around being able to A/B test hypotheses with products, with websites, online shops, apps later on as well, rather than building, deploying, and then measuring was huge. And Optimizely kind of laid the path for that. They were one of the earliest companies with definitely the best product back then in the market. And I joined super low ranks in the sales team. I did half a year before that with Rocket in Southeast Asia. So kind of came from this like super weird trip of like crazy responsibility in a country where you have no clue about, and then kind of went into this like SaaS sales track, which was super interesting. And Optimizely was kind of built and managed by then by a lot of former Salesforce folks. So they really came in with the playbook. And being part of that for a
They
year.
know the game, right? Salesforce, they also somehow invent certain things.
Yeah, definitely. And there's the Salesforce Mafia in San Francisco. In our world, where we operate with HiPeople, here we have the Zalando Mafia in Germany with a lot of ex-Zalando folks in TA, in talent acquisition. In general, software sales, it's the Salesforce team for sure. Yeah, and that was extremely interesting to see how they build the organization, to see how they build the sales team, drive the go-to-market motion. And yeah, our task was operating out of Amsterdam to grow into different markets. Of course, my focus was DACH or GSA, so Germany, Switzerland, Austria.
Oh, nice. I spent some time, I think it was 2018, 19, with some Salesforce managers and AEs to understand how they run sales from Dublin, from I think the European headquarters it was. And it was so insightful. It was the first time where I really understood how you can design an organization that is just sales and how they design the career paths, because you don't have the ability to hire so many people that you need at a certain amount of time, and you also cannot manage the peaks. So they developed smaller roles like a sales associate, a BDR, a SDR, the roles that are classical right now, but how they just ran it overall to say, okay, that's the career trajectory, and you can start there. We source from university and educate them over 2 to 4 years, and depending on the need and the performance of certain new trained people, they can take a market or a vertical or a product. And for me, that was, from a hiring strategy, it was mind-blowing, but it just works at scale, if you are big enough. And you have the unlimited demand side that you just need to sell, for instance. But it was really outstanding. So what did you learn from that time, how to build a sales organization?
I think you mentioned an important point there, that certain things work on scale and certain things don't work on scale. And I think that's super important to like highlight over and over again, because middle management, sales leaders moving from one 500 people company in B2B SaaS to the next one, that makes sense. And they operate their playbooks and it's very comparable. Hence the repeatability of a go-to-market motion and sales approach makes sense there. But I think the risk is there's then amazing blog posts and slide decks on that motion and on that blueprint. But what works for a 500 people, product market fit B2B SaaS company probably doesn't work for your 200, 100 or 50 employee company that is in a different stage. So if you ask me what have I learned being part of such a like full-blown, full-scale sales organization, is that, companies and sales orgs and go-to-market teams, marketing teams go through life cycles. You operate in the context of recruitment and TA yourself, Thomas. I do with HiPeople as well, and that often requires that teams reshape, roles are redefined, and I think that's super important to bear in mind, because otherwise you might fall for the trap that you are using one company's model, but it doesn't work for yours. What's interesting though with the way that a Salesforce or back then an Optimizely works, it's that it's quite hierarchical, and that's an interesting like juxtaposition to how at least back then these companies describe themselves. Very personal, very close, very family-like. The sales team actually like super steep hierarchies and pyramids for certain reasons. And I think that's also the Salesforce school. It's like you see like a lot of like ex-military slang in there, and also the titles, are influenced by that. And I think again that works for big scale, big volume. Smaller companies need a different approach. I read an interesting piece recently on what's called the Renaissance seller, which is kind of the first AE that operates alongside the founder for a year or even two. And then in that kind of like pot of founder and first AE actually actively shapes the positioning, the go-to-market motion, the sales motion. And I found that a very interesting one in terms of like being fundamentally different than, industry-specific pods or, like vertical focused SDR, BDR, AE teams. But again, come to my point, like that might be the one thing that you need right now versus, what a NPAL or another like full-blown large company needs.
Yes, or now I even see in SAP, because I just did a podcast with the SAP Germany CEO, and she runs around 2,500 people for the sales and service organization in Germany.
Yeah.
And she also talked about some roles, and then there was a new role I just heard about, a value add engineer. I also heard and saw this at LinkedIn, where a seller at LinkedIn cannot define the price for the account. They first need to go to the value estimation or value team, and they estimate the pricing for the AA that the EA can offer.
Interesting.
AE, sorry, for the AE that he or she can offer to the account, because they don't have this, as you said, independence. They have the strict rules and hierarchies. They need to stick to that. And I think that's also something when you go into this value-based pricing mode, that is also a function that is now even getting more and more important, right? That you not give a price tag and say you pay by seat or something, but you pay by value, and depending on your discovery, you determine the value, which can be very tricky.
Also something that can be driven by the buyer, I guess, if they get it.
Yes. Definitely.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's something you see again with scale, that there's like a huge degree of differentiation and split of responsibilities, in way more levels, in way more specialization, compared to, again, the one founder, one AE or two AEs. But my first thought for the value adds kind of like sales enablement function would be, it's a great job for software actually to like determine potential value and help price better. But I guess if you have super complex products and pricing changes a lot, that makes sense that you have
and also with A/B testing, maybe it's easier, or with an SAP or a Salesforce where you directly can connect it to revenue generated. I think for recruitment solutions, it's then a bit harder, because the buying side, they need to take or buy into the assumptions you generate together, right? And it can be a study or a customer result or whatever. But if they don't believe it, it's worthless. For revenue, it's a bit simpler, because you can just calculate it and say, that's proven.
True. Yeah, and then for them, they maybe need somebody who's like deep into the numbers and can kind of help build that. Interesting.
But I'm always interested to also understand how you think about this when you do pricing, and how do you offer your service, because I think you also add a lot of value when your product is used correctly. I also see it on my end with PeopleWise, when companies really utilize our service for the right company stage in the right environment, they can get an 10x return from what they pay from it. Some companies just need to open up for that, or need to be able to understand what you can do with certain products when you use it correctly. How do you approach that with HiPeople?
Yeah, great question. I think also here, spoiler, depends on the stage. And I think pricing needs to develop with how your offering develops. And the key thing for us early on was simplicity, and that everybody gets it. That companies that want to use HiPeople, and I can share a bit about the why of why we exist and why companies use us in a second. but that they understand how we price, and there's not kind of a black box pricing that leaves the buyer with more questions, and maybe also a kind of a certain degree of insecurity around, are there hidden costs that I'm running into? Is there anything like we don't understand, we can't control? And there are pricing schemas that are built in that way by design, and I think it's it doesn't pay tribute to the relationship we as a software vendor build as a partner with our clients and with our users. So for us, it was the initial thought, and it's still very much driving the way we price, where we make sure there's like two drivers that everybody understands. And I as a buyer can also say, okay, I want either less volume, for example, more features, and by that can like basically control what do I need, and also can see how that correlates with price. I think very often you have these like extremely complicated, like huge feature walls that you don't really get. You don't really understand. There's like 100 toggles you toggle on and off. HubSpot is a great example for that.
Yes.
I found myself on a renewal call with HubSpot recently, asking for an explanation from them on what do we currently actually have, and like where maybe duplicate features in the different packages we have enabled, because it's like so complicated.
In case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it.
Gut feeling by design. I don't think. I think that there are ways for them to make it easier. So for us, simplicity, and yeah, just like you said, of course, the approach we're running, and I think now we have to add a bit more context on HiPeople, but the reason companies use us is to increase the efficiency within their processes, and that's a very clear ROI, right? I did something manual, it had direct costs, it had opportunity costs, and now I'm automating it with HiPeople. There's directly kind of an efficiency gain I can calculate, or we can also help calculate, and then that can be compared to what a HiPeople would cost. And on the other side, and that's kind of the big topic we're chasing as a company, we help people in recruitment, but also hiring managers, to really make the best hire. So the quality of hire as an end result is something that goes up. Harder to calculate. It's a metric that a lot of companies look at differently, both in terms of how they define this, but also how they calculate this. And what we do pays direct tribute to that. If you use HiPeople properly, it will help you to increase your quality.
How do you calculate the quality of hire?
Before I get into kind of the details on kind of our approach here, maybe just kind of a quick, kind of zooming out, explaining for everybody who listens, and what quality of hire actually is, and what the different angles are you can take. It was referred to, I can't recall the author, but as the holy grail of recruitment data, which sounds nice and fancy, but it also means it's like hard to find, right?
Yes. I can agree.
Who actually found the holy grail? So, and that is just due to, you ask 10 people how they calculate quality of hire, I'll guarantee you'll get probably 9 to 10 different answers back. And they're probably also all right. HiPeople as a software vendor, exists because we partner with companies and give them access to data that helps them make the best hire. That's the main reason we exist. We started with the company back in end of 2019. Sebastian and myself coming into kind of that world as hiring managers. We both knew the impact of kind of the people side on a business's outcome and performance, right? If you find amazing people and they stay long and they are engaged, that has a tremendous impact on the organization. But we also felt like there's different ways on how you can work on improving the people side, right? You can basically look at it as from an acquisition standpoint, like where can I find great people? Then you can take a look at the kind of selection side of things. How do I make sure that the person I hire is the best person for the job? And then everything post-hire, so learning and development, maybe great onboarding, maybe having engaged employees, measuring this with solutions like Peakon and others. And that's maybe one thing we missed in the intro, like, my kind of like experience with Peakon early on. And we felt like, so Sebastian and myself, when we started the company HiPeople, we felt like both the acquisition or the search side of things, as well as kind of everything that happens post-hire. There's a lot of great technology there. Peakon, automated is tracking and analysis of engagement data. There's great technology there. But what's really underestimated is the impact and the potential of like really, really good selection. And that was kind of the bird's eye view on the whole topic we're working on with HiPeople. The personal entry point was we were mega frustrated ourselves as hiring manager that we kind of entered a room like the one we're sitting in right now. And we look at a CV 15 minutes before the call. We maybe got a glance at the LinkedIn profile and then kind of ran through standard questions that were kind of fit to this being a culture fit interview or this being a skill fit interview. And then we're asked, hey, please score and rate, and would you hire or not hire? And the company I worked at prior to starting HiPeople, Adjust, great company in the edtech space.
Is it also where you did a lot of hiring? Because I think they grew fast and you were also at a bigger management role, right?
Precisely. And we grew extremely fast, decentrally, so in 10 plus offices. And, I felt like not being in a room, but being on a Zoom call, 30, 60 minutes with somebody in Japan, does it really kind of allow me to make the best call on who has the biggest potential for that role? So coming back to this, like that kind of the individual pain we felt ourselves, like if, people are driving organizations to be successful. And if, the key thing that can really be improved by technology is that selection process, then that's a problem worth solving. So we jumped at that end of 2019. And long story short, the job we do today for companies around the globe, biggest sports brands out there, technology companies, insurance companies, companies in the fintech or healthcare industry, what we help them to do is very efficiently.
Can you also name some spotlight customers?
I can drop a couple of names. There's the reason I went for kind of industries now because there are a few also that we can't name, unfortunately.
I see.
But we in Germany, for example, maybe for the listeners coming here from Germany, we work with the amazing team at WeFox, at Celonis. In the US, we work with a really interesting company called IntelliCare in healthcare. They hire 40,000 nurses per year.
Wow.
And they do this with us. And what all of these companies do is they get additional data points that really allows for an objective assessment. Does Thomas fit the job as, for example, founder at PeopleWise? And we do acquire that data very often.
How would you assess that?
There's two ways we go about this. The first is pre-employment assessments and tests. So we take what have existed for a long time with classical personality assessment, but we enrich this with assessments around skills and capabilities. Can he speak English well enough to be able to work in the UK? Is he able to operate the technology that we use here? Is he, sharp enough? So you can assess cognitive ability as well, and really kind of complement this with anything you need to know to predict, does Thomas fit the job or not? We have companies that go very heavy on soft skills with us. Does the person have grit? Is the person resilient enough to work here with us? And all these things sound, I think, probably interesting, but also something you feel like you could assess in an interview. The thing is, the data shows you can't. Mishires, so people leaving voluntarily in the first 12 months of their employment, is an enormous problem and accounts to 1 trillion of cost, 1 trillion in the US alone, because people get hyped on markers in CVs. Okay, great university, great former employer. They are biased, right? They rehire themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we've all been there. Like if I talk to very experienced hiring managers, very experienced leaders in talent acquisition or recruitment, and I ask, what's your best and what's your worst hire? And how come like you would hire that person? Like they're often not that far from each other. And it is very, very hard to find the best candidate for the job for all the reasons that I've mentioned. And that's where we come in. We, with the assessments and pre-employment tests we really help you to understand, does that person fit the job? Can she, perform? Is she the best fit? And we complement this with reference check data, for example, also fully automated. So yes, we've assessed you, but now we get feedback from, let's say, your former manager, your former colleague. the person that
How
you've
do you
managed.
do this automatically?
We own the process completely. So it's asynchronous for you as the company asking for this. You define, I want to get 5 references until next Friday. They should be all managers and ideally coming from Salesforce, Figma, and Amazon. And then our workflow requests these references from the candidate, and we reach out to the references and walk them through what we call a intelligent survey-based setup. That means intelligent means we don't just ask you standardized questions, but we go deep, understanding the responses and then digging deeper. So what experienced recruiters can do really well is peel the onion. I ask you a question, and then I ask again and again to really get to the core. And that's something we can do as well. If we collect a reference about you and we feel or we see in the data there's an anomaly in the responses, we automatically dig deeper to really understand what's at its core. And if you look at these data points,
because for instance, you do this async, and there is, let's say, the reference check running and the final interviews running in parallel takes 2 weeks. And then you get 3 responses. They were a good positive pattern. And then there is one anomaly. Do you then also check the first 3 questions again on the anomaly to?
No. What we do is we look for patterns in the data. So you might remind me of the name of your co-founder.
Mina.
So you might be a reference for Mina. And you're being asked 15 questions, and the result is an anomaly in the first 10. So you say she's super extroverted, and then the next question you point more towards high degree of introversion.
Okay, within the questionnaire.
Within the data set.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we go deep on these points to really understand what's behind this. And the beautiful thing with this is we take bias out of the reference check, which is crazy high. If you think about, you want to hire somebody, you do reference check at the end of the process. You want to hear the good stuff, and so we take that out. We fully automate it, so it's not really causing any manual work anymore. And we're getting really, really insightful data points that helps you to either confirm what you've seen. Okay, great, she's the best fit, let's hire her. Or maybe it surfaces things that you should have a closer eye on. And that combined with the assessment data we obtain just makes it super powerful. Our agenda is not to say, stop looking at CVs or stop doing interviews. We say, continue this, but complement it with data that is really objective and insightful, and do it in a way that is like really efficient. Because, if we look outside kind of the window into the TA and recruitment worlds today, it has been shaken up, right? Teams are smaller. There's a lower volume of hiring. So the pressure on really finding the best people is way, way higher now than it has been a few years ago, where people, were compensated on like hiring fast and hiring high volumes. Just some numbers here, just for context, it's crazy. Tech alone, the layoffs we've seen this year are already 3% higher, and today is mid-April, compared to everything we've seen in the last year in tech layoffs. So it's around 170,000 or 168,000 leavers. And that just for context.
I looked it up, and I did an episode on a podcast, and then also here in my podcast where we looked into the same numbers you just referred to. And back then in February, I thought of looking just at the big logos, Meta, Salesforce, all the companies who
Amazon.
did later. Amazon, I thought, okay, this is now the peak, but now I think maybe we see another wave, and then maybe this Q1 to Q3 this year might be the peak, and then it maybe slowly discontinues, hopefully. But I was more positive in February than I am now, because also I did a lot of interviewing for senior leaders, and there I saw a lot of people from big tech companies who were laid off in the beginning, because usually they shut down the management layers and then they assess again, okay, what do we really need in a second iteration? And I was not aware of that, but this is now going on, and there might be some more layoffs in May, June, July at the big tech companies for different orgs. So we will see. Yeah, so super interesting. I wanted to ask something, but no, I forgot about it, what it was.
No, but so I'm not in the position to like predict where this is going, but the leaders within recruitment and talent acquisition that we work with and that I talk to regularly, more or less all say, when we come back, we'll think, live and breathe talent acquisition, so recruiting, differently. And the common sense is smaller teams that do their job differently compared to how we've doing this before.
Yes.
I'd say let's see, because once the markets bounce back and maybe in a few years we're back in like in a bull market like we have seen it in the last 10 years. Maybe we'll be back and doing exactly what has been done before.
I think so.
Let's see. But what kind of the word in the street at the moment at least is the function is shaping in a different way. There's a huge emphasis on making the right hire.
Sophisticated a lot.
Way more sophisticated.
You know what? This is what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
When you just look at the Nasdaq, it really increased in value very fast in a very short period of time post-COVID. And that also means somehow a correlation that there is as much growth in terms of total market overall than never before, as well as the most demand for open positions as never before. And there were not so many recruiters out there being able to hire all those requisitions. And therefore, what I saw really as a pattern, a lot of companies just grew for the sake of growth. Of course, there was a rationale behind it. Growth at all costs. Let's go for it. Totally right at the circumstances. Yeah. But how to do that was not right, because sometimes really, really junior recruiters were doing jobs were oversubscribed, and somebody maybe is a working student and then a recruiter. First of all, I think recruiting is not a junior position because it has high impact. As you said, 1 trillion just in the US of mishires. Crazy amount. Why outsourcing this to junior people or giving junior people so much responsibility and freedom, right? They need training. But if you just, go for it and do it. And then you also have a junior hiring manager who maybe is a first-time hiring manager and a first-time recruiter. Oh my God, you can make so many mistakes that are super, super, super expensive. You see down the line. And this happened at scale. And now the market is cleaned up by all the people who maybe also just were unlucky, but also who were just in the wrong job, get wiped out again or got wiped out again.
Yeah, the costs are even higher. So there's a study of Gallup that the whole issue of kind of disengaged employees, and we had like quiet quitting as kind of one phenomenon in the last.
That was a big term.
6-9 months there. That's 7.8 billion in cost each year globally, because of the lack of productivity. And
what exactly does it mean for you, quiet quitting?
So that number refers to kind of the productivity. So the 7.8 from Gallup that's connected to kind of the lack of productivity because of low engagement. Quiet quitting in that context can be a result of that, where people stay in their job but are not as engaged and productive and impactful as they could be, just because they're kind of disconnected with the company. And the whole discussion around quiet quitting came from COVID and post-COVID developments, and how work has changed, and how not working from the office but working from home, and now also kind of the hit that companies are taking with layoffs, how that is kind of shaping the relationship between company and employee. My perspective on this is that that's a hyper-complex, huge problem, but it starts in the recruitment process, right?
Hiring somebody in the wrong environment, for instance? In the wrong
environment, in the wrong job. And I remember, before starting HiPeople, I interviewed for a big American fintech, and I obviously didn't accept and take the job, but then started the company, luckily. But I could have seen myself take that job as well.
Square? Was it Square?
No, it was a different one, but also like in that context there. Even though I kind of felt like might not be the right thing, I do want to do my own thing, but this could be interesting. And one version of me could have said like, okay, let's do this anyways. And I would have looked like maybe a kind of a logical good hire for them, even though I wasn't. And that's why,
Because you made the decision?
So no, I made the decision against this, but if I would have taken the job, I knew myself I probably would have stayed for like a long, long time. But that's kind of the internal view on this. My point is, if you go for kind of the standardized recruitment process, we like interview 2, case study, on-site, dinner, let's hire that person. You can make great hires, but you also can make terrible hires. And I would have, for them, it would have been a terrible hire because, if I would have taken that job, my engagement would have been low because I would have wanted to get out and do my own thing. And that's my point with like, if you want to think about people as the driving factor for organizations, and if you want to think about what you as a company can do to impact that positively as much as possible, there are these different entry points. Again, where do I find my talent? How do I keep it? But then also from the talent I found, who really is the best fit? And that's the key focus we're having here at HiPeople. And the numbers that we're seeing right now with like TA teams getting smaller also means the problem is getting bigger because it's smaller TA teams and they need to do the job on their own. We talked about the development of like big teams, small teams, and hiring volumina. Recruitment has been seen as the cost center for a long, long time.
There still is sometimes.
Why? Because it also like objectively seen they were a cost center, right? Like all of a sudden you need to hire 50 recruiters. Then the hiring kind of wave calms down. You have a lot of people there that you don't really like, need for the amount of requisitions and open jobs, etc. And I really think that is changing, and it's changing for the good, that you have like really strong, super experienced, tech-enabled and equipped teams that are extremely efficient, rather than these overblown, very large TA teams that are, at the end of the day, doing a good job seasonally, but in the long term are maybe too large for the organization.
Yeah, and I think that's always a general business problem. Like you always need to deal with a lack of resource in an unplanned way, because that's how economy works, right? There is an opportunity or not, or there are certain market dynamics and you need to respond to it, or you just place a bet. And then sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you need to double down on this one opportunity that comes up now. And then if you don't have the team, you can then build it, but then maybe it's too late. And then you have a team and the opportunity is not there anymore.
Exactly.
So this is also what I found out when talking to some meta people. I always thought they do everything perfect. But then through some also reference checks and so on,
Very good.
I digged a bit deeper, and I was also curious in understanding the context. And I think they are very good. So big tech companies are very, very good on the technology side. But what they also all do not way better than, let's say, just a unicorn or just a startup, maybe better than a startup, but a more major startup, the planning side. Why? Because if there is then, let's say, the founder or the board, and they decide now, okay, different track, we need to invest now in the metaverse, change everything, backwards plan now, right? And then this also feels like, okay, couldn't we have planned this better? No, sometimes it's just a decision needs to be executed now at scale. That's crazy sometimes. And then you to have this flexibility and also know your metrics and know how to respond and be very flexible and enabled. And therefore you need a very smart and capable team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the service side that enables that is always going to be there. I think what we're going to see in the next 5 years is the technology side really catching up even more. So if you look at SaaS spend in HR, it has been pretty like steadily growing by 10-15% year over year for the last couple of years. So there's consistent catch-ups on that side. with HR, TA, recruiting teams being more enabled, having more tools at their disposal, being able to be data-driven, being able to plan and forecast better, etc. And I think that is something that is going to just continue to grow. And there are industries that are very far advanced, that are very modern, forward-thinking, by design, data-driven, and open to technology. But of course, there's also this enormous number of companies out there that as we speak, maybe thinking about doing the first jump from spreadsheet to applicant tracking system.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, from pen and paper assessment to online assessment. So there's also still that world out there, and we sometimes forget to talk and think about them, that are like not ahead of the curve, not on the curve, but behind the curve.
How do you serve the customer in the US with 40,000 nurses a year?
Mm-hmm. We don't interview them all, so that's not what we do with HiPeople, right? We do run automated processes to help them get rich data and insights efficiently, but to eventually inform the best hiring decision possible. And that works for us very well as a software vendor from operating from Europe. We have teams here on the customer support front that support and enable them in their business hours. And anything we do with them regarding like product feedback loops or trying to understand what their challenges are and so on and so forth. And so the product and engineering team here in Europe, and that is also feasible and doable with the time zone difference. Eventually, we might do this podcast again in a year or 2 or 3. We might have a team in the US then. Let's see. But for now, us as a European company, we're able to grow in the US, to work with some of the largest brands there and enable them and support them.
How did you close them?
Nothing magical or out of the ordinary, to be honest. It might have, and we talked about kind of my background and experience also working for large US tech SaaS players. Maybe that experience have helped us here to kind of like replicate processes on the go-to-market side that they know. So we're talking the same language, with buyers in the US as we do with buyers in the UK or Europe or Asia.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And what's your market segmentation? Mm-hmm. So do you target Europe and US and UK or also globally?
Yeah, no. So we have customers around the globe, and of course, there's like customers coming in via inbound and swiping the credit card, starting to use HiPeople, and then over time growing with us. They come from literally anywhere. The big focus for us is Europe and the US. So that's where we kind of focus our go-to-market energy on proactively.
And that's the regional segmentation. And do you also have a segmentation by company stage and by industry, for instance?
Company stage, not really, but company size and growth, right? For us, companies that are growing at a certain rate are really interesting because that's where the problems arise that we can solve so well, right? Yeah. So if inefficiencies in the recruitment process and lack of data to make the best, most well-informed decision. And that often happens with companies that are, sitting kind of between the, few hundreds on the lower end and 5 to 10,000 on the larger end. So that's kind of the scope. So you could say like mid-market up to upper mid-market. So no true enterprise play with like 50,000 FTEs yet. Yeah, but we'll see. Again, maybe a future version of myself sitting on that podcast in a year or 2 from now will be different.
Yeah, hopefully there is a lot of inefficiencies out there to resolve with big organizations. True. How do you see the AI movement?
Mm-hmm. First, super refreshing. I think the overall motion that there's a generative AI accessible for basically everybody is extremely exciting. And I think what is going on in the market, its breadth is extremely creative and fun and great to see. Two things that I personally follow and find very exciting. How is big tech responding to this? And you can see Microsoft, deploying great ways to kind of enable the usage of their tools and technology, right? So that Excel and other solutions will be kind of guided by AI. So I think that kind of enhancement of an experience. I use tech, but I have support while using it is fantastic. HubSpot did a piece recently where you can basically, like in a conversational way, you can share and you can create a prompt on 15 individual actions by just saying, hey, I met with Thomas. We talked about this. I'll get back to him next week. And maybe find out
from text, from sound to text, for instance.
Yeah, and then into CRM records, right? I think that's super cool. Again, Microsoft is doing the same with their system, so like to just lower the barrier to entry of I interact with technology and I use it. I think that's one interesting track. The other is like all the pinpoint players that are right now creating something completely new, driven by generative AI. I think the impact for us here at HiPeople and the impact for our industry is extremely exciting. Because it really flips the script. Things that have been crucial in order to, find and hire the best people are kind of losing their value. So if I'm applying at, a random company in the steel industry tomorrow where I have no knowledge about, it takes me 30 seconds to write the best cover letter that I've seen in the last 10 years. So cover letter off the table, like will never be looked at again. I don't think so. Optimizing CVs to make sure they are, close to what the job description is asking for, is kind of echoing its language, etc.
Also writing job descriptions. I made a very good hire with asking ChatGPT on designing the whole hiring process by all the input values I delivered. Of course, I needed to do some thinking, but I ran it through the algorithm and it was very well designed. Yeah. Of course, you need people, still experts, to judge if it's good or not. Yeah. But you can optimize a lot.
Yeah. So there's, a lot of things are in motion there. Of course, we also here at HiPeople have an eye on how can our customers and users benefit from generative AI in the context of assessing candidates, in the context of understanding, does this person fit the job? Can she perform? And there's numerous ways on how this probably is going to play out in the next couple of years. But I think, the big impact for the world of recruitment is, the cards are reshuffled on what you look at to understand who fits and who doesn't. Just because the tool is available for a candidate. And that changes behavior on the recruiter side, that changes behavior on the candidate front. And then second, the tools that are going to be available for me as a recruiter are just going to be, way more easier to operate and provide way more insights, right? If you think about, again, I'm applying at your company, you ask me to do a 15-minute assessment, then you do a reference check, you get 5 references back. That's a lot of data to work with. I think we do a great way on visualizing it and making it very applicable and usable. But think about such big and deep data sets also being way more easier to work with, because it's at different layers of complexity. It's more summarized, maybe more contextualized to what you're looking for with your job description, etc. So personally excited, and I think going to have a big impact on recruiting,
especially on some volume recruitment when you need to go into one job, and then you can, I think, see a lot of patterns there, and it's really sometimes really just a volume game with a certain level of quality. And that pieces, I think, can be very much driven and impacted by the whole movement that is currently happening on the generation of application side to the evaluation side to then preparing the whole onboarding and the organizational piece. That's super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts small now, right? I, as a recruiter, I don't need to, spend an hour drafting job descriptions anymore. I can do this in minutes. I don't know. Analyzing scorecards is something I can also do in a second. Like I said, understanding and analyzing assessment data, maybe also coming up with content on that side, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, it fits well into the market that we're looking at. We talked about this a few minutes ago. Smaller teams, more focused on getting the right hire, which is a daunting task, right?
Yeah.
It's challenging. And I think technology is going to play a bigger part in making that happen in the future. We're going to be part of that with HiPeople. In general, more technology will be part of that moving forward.
And how did the time at Workday or Peakon shaped you with HiPeople? Because there is a overlap.
Yeah, true. So that was a very brief time I spent with the team at Peakon back in Copenhagen, where the company was founded. I was studying there. I wanted to work next to my master's. I heard that the former what then became the founding team of Peakon, that there was this group of folks that are working on something new. They prior to that sold a company to Cisco, and I knew they were in town. I knew they were building something, and I reached out and I was like, hey, I heard you're working on something in HR tech. I'm super curious. Can we talk? I want to know what you're doing. And then met with them, and that turned into an employment for some time. Again, only brief time. So after 6 months, I left and then switched over to Just here in Berlin. But that time was
you spent in market research there, I guess, or something similar.
Yeah, it was kind of a broader go-to-market function. So again, kind of the whole spectrum. Closing first customers, doing marketing events, doing a bit of demand gen, so kind of a very generalist go-to-market role.
Did that shape you in founding HiPeople?
In a sense, what I've learned there is that in a world where you have massive suite products where everything is available, we have companies, a very well-known software company here in Germany, where you have a CRM, an HRM, an ATS, etc. So in worlds where this exists, a company like Peakon can succeed in. Peakon is different in a way, or was different in a way, that it was like one pinpoint solution to do one thing really, really well. Mm-hmm. Tracking and measuring employee engagement. And all of these like larger suites had that as a subset, small feature. But the problem was so painful and so large, the company said, hey, we need improved technology to nail that problem. So we're working with that suite, but we're also getting this solution in place because we know we're getting the best technology, the best data to do so. And that was a big influence for me and for us as a team to start thinking about the opportunity of fixing the issue with, finding the right people for the job with HiPeople, because the depth we create with our work is something that you can't do with shallow solutions that are out there that are kind of like some subset of a larger suite. And that's we talked about the spend on HR technology moving up consistently year over year. The user behavior is changing, and it started changing back then, where individuals said, I need a dedicated solution for better screening. I need a dedicated solution for better assessments. Yeah. I don't need everything in one suite. Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And at some point, it makes sense again to have everything out of one system. But it's more the enterprise 50,000 headcount companies what you're talking about.
Yeah, or very complementary solutions, right? So I don't know if I have my ATS and I do put my scorecards in there, the CVs should be in there as well. I don't need a separate solution to store my CVs, but then, so there are these like complementary use cases for us as well. Like companies use us to pre-screen with assessments and then also to do reference check. It's very complementary.
This is also what we do sometimes with PeopleWise when we get hired for a certain company. Let's say company stage, early stage is below 100, and then they don't know which ATS to choose. And then they sometimes go with a one-fits-all solution. And then we say, okay, you can do that when you don't grow at scale, because we see companies doubling each year. For instance, they need to go to a dedicated solution that is covering recruitment. And within recruitment, you can use a scheduling tool, analytics tool, whatever, or an all-in-one solution, and then an add-on and so on. But I would not go with a generalistic approach unless you grow very slow, and then it's maybe good enough.
Yeah.
This is also important depending on the environment and on the plans you have.
Yeah.
So I think that totally makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that is a great development, right? Because the demand for strong technology is increasing. That causes companies like us to work on really significant problems and build amazing technology, and that overall kind of enhances the experience. And again, connecting the dots here, that's where the market is going, right?
I think so.
So I think it all fits very well.
And what's the next step for HiPeople and you?
That's a great question. So we have been kind of consistently sticking to our mission and our why from day one, and we're continuing to do so, right? So we started with this question: how can the people side of things can be improved? And the answer for us was data and automation, and that is the journey we're on, and we're consistently following. And for us, this year it really means to kind of double down on the whole selection piece. Job's not done. This is there's so much more depth that we can surface and uncover
on the product development and sales side.
Yeah, precisely. And on product, going deeper into these solutions. We have one of the largest assessment libraries in the market already, but of course there's like almost an infinite number of assessments you can create, because every job is different. Every company looks for something different. If you hire a product manager and I hire a product manager, these will be two different candidates, two different roles, two different job descriptions. For us, that really means kind of going deep there, exploring ways how we can make our software even easier to use and better to operate for our end users, leveraging AI, for example. And on the go-to-market side of things, to continue to grow in the key geographies and key areas for us. I think that these are the key things for us this year.
Yes. And who is somebody I don't know, but who I should maybe interview next on the show?
That is a great question. Is there a certain angle, a certain direction, or just anything?
It can be anything. Maybe towards the field of either being a manager with a certain experience or perspective on people topics. It doesn't have to be hiring or talent acquisition.
Yeah.
Or somebody within that field, or somebody having a very specific idea about the topic.
Two people.
Yes.
You should talk to my friend Nikhil from Zalando, who has been for the last couple of years building out everything tech in recruitment at Zalando. So incredible journey he has taken, and kind of really building out that over multiple years. And then Julian, who's with HiPeople, who also was with me at Peakon in Copenhagen. He was with me here at HiPeople for a brief time, and who's now with HiPeople in the HR management space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So could you also intro me to them?
Sure. Yeah.
Would be cool. And any final words from your end?
No pressure.
No pressure.
My final words would be not trying to only ride the recruitment wave, but of course it's kind of very prominent there, looking at our conversation and also what we do with our people. But the potential that the potential that can be unlocked for companies with using real objective data to improve decisions is massive, and that's probably true for recruitment, but also for performance or for anything go-to-market related. I think it's very easy to fall for a blueprint. It's very easy to fall for experience or for hiring somebody to do the job. But I think consistently as a company sticking to leveraging objective data to improve the outcome of decisions is always a good choice. It's true for recruitment, but it's also true for anything else you do.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks a lot.